Hey guys, Youngblood Fantasy 91 here with another commentary for you wonderful people. Today's music consists of plenty of horrid acts. That's not to say many other decent bands and projects are lingering to make music listenable, such as Sufjan Stevens, or Black Country Communion, or the Black Keys, or Arctic Monkeys, or Radiohead, or Fiona Apple, or even Kate Bush. But on the opposite side of the coin, you have the media-laden teeny-boppin' pop stars that will not exit the stupid record charts despite it having been an upteen amount of times after you heard the insipid poppy nonsense of Carly Rae Jepsen, or the unnecessarily edgy lyrics of Maroon 5, or even the incessant references to the Inexorable Club made by oh-so-not-vacuous Flo Rida, who, by the way, is #1 in America. Thanks, guys. And because there are so many artists that can easily be critiqued for their lack of musicianship or lack of talent, it's not a surprise that people are bashing on One Direction, who are, for the record, a British-Irish boy band, since people call all of them British erroneously, including people like ADoseOfBuckley, who did a musical autopsy video on One Direction. Now, unlike the previous users I tackled, I pretty much was in assent as to what Adam Buckley had to say regarding One Direction. However, all that changed in one specific part of the video after he makes the most inappropriate comparison ever, and indirectly stating that One Direction could be the impetus for another British invasion. I'll listen in, and I'll see what I have to say about this.
So, One Direction. A bunch of British pretty boys taking the US by storm by singing stupid songs about being in love with girls. Wait, hold on here. Where have I heard that before? If only I could think of another example.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you something. I think you'll understand. And I say that something. I wanna hold your hand. I wanna hold your hand. I wanna hold your hand.
Oh yeah, you're comparing a hack boy band that obviously did not spark any sort of revolution except faux revitalization of the boy band movement to the band that actually laid the foundation for the British invasion, an influential music movement based on post-Second World War sentiment and offshoot of the American rock and roll movement from the 50s. I like how you make this comparison solely based on lyrics of particular songs, especially when you blatantly ignore how the Beatles, even early on, innovated the music scene with usage of minor chords in certain songs.
I got arms that long to hold you and keep you by my side.
And changing the point of view of the speaker in love songs.
You think you've lost your love? Well, I saw her yesterday. It's you she's thinking of.
And even if you want to dismiss the lyrics, you cannot ignore how melodic and unique the Beatles sound is, whereas One Direction sounds like a mediocre carbon copy of 98 Degrees.
Oh, shit. How pissed are you right now? How fucking ready are you to stop this video, go to my channel, click unsubscribe, and comment about how much you hate me right now? Comparing One Direction to the Beatles? Blasphemy! But it's really not. I'm gonna bet 99% of the people who listen to this were not alive when the Beatles first performed in the USA in 1964.
And I'm sure you weren't either, man, so assuming that you can make this sort of comparison is just as flawed.
Their first big singles, I Wanna Hold Your Hand, She Loves You, and Love Me Do, are poppy songs with incredibly simple lyrics designed to dampen the panties of girls everywhere.
I know the lyrics are somewhat simple, and I get that, but again, music also plays a dominant role in the designing of a great song, and the Beatles were experts in creating timeless melodies. And besides, do you think the Beatles were the only members of the British invasion that actually crafted somewhat simplistic lyrics? Take a look at bands such as Them,
And her name is G. L. Whoa. R. I. G. L. Y. Oh, yeah. G. L. Y. Oh, yeah. I'm gonna shout it all night. Oh, yeah. I'm gonna shout it every day. Oh, yeah.
The Kinks,
The only time I feel alright is by your side. Girl, I want to be with you all of the time, all day and all of the night. All day and all of the night. All day and all of the night.
and the Dave Clark 5.
I'm pieces, bits and pieces. Since you left
Based on your criteria, One Direction is easily comparable to the previous three bands, despite the fact all of these bands wrote these songs on their own, whereas One Direction on their first album had only 2 songs that they somewhat wrote with the assistance of 2 other people. And this leads me to another point. The Beatles usually credited Lennon-McCartney for their hit songs, and even Harrison was alone in writing his own songs. One Direction went through close to 15 other songwriters, not including themselves, to produce the same basic lyrics. Think about it.
If you had have been the same age you are now, and if you currently don't like One Direction, Justin Bieber, or any other male pop act, you would have hated the Beatles at the time.
But the Beatles became famous around the cusp of a huge cultural revolution that was transpiring between the early to late 60s, so they embodied not only a musical message, but a cultural message that plenty can relate to. One Direction is hated on because they make unoriginal content that is a throwback to the campy boy band heyday of Hanson or the Backstreet Boys. That's not original, that's recapitalizing on something stupid. Give the Beatles some credit, they only started a massive musical movement that swept the world.
Of course, the Beatles played their own instruments and were far more talented, and those early songs were just the ticket to write much better and more interesting songs like Eleanor Rigby, Lady Madonna, Hey Jude, Come Together, and dabble in more experimental stuff like Strawberry Fields and I Am the Walrus.
Since you cited songs from Revolver and Sgt. Pepper and Abbey Road, then you understand why the Beatles retained their popularity. The Beatles realized that they could be more introspective and experimental. That's why albums such as Rubber Soul were landmark. They knew that they could create newer sounds with more interesting lyrics. Are One Direction going to do that? Well, looking at the list of producers and list of songwriters they hired for their albums, I don't think so. I don't see any independence from being overproduced or manufacturing of sound. This is why they are worlds off from the Beatles, even if you consider the Beatles' pre-Rubber Soul era, because even they had one producer with 1 or 2 songwriters. That's it.
But when they hit the shores of North America in 1964, they were no better than the boy bands of today. And anyone who disputes that is just simply in denial.
Do you not fail to realize that when the Beatles touched the ground of New York City in February of 1964, they opened the sluice gates for other great artists to come around and make such great music such as Dusty Springfield, Petula Clark, Manfred Mann, The Animals, The Yardbirds, and Jerry and the Pacemakers? Did One Direction do that? Well, they kind of made Wanted relevant. Do you not see the asymmetry? Do you not see the cultural impact of this? Or are you really going to say that the Beatles should be forced on the same creative plateau as One Direction, despite their venerated history and ability to continually write cutting-edge songs? Man, you're myopic.
Of course, there's about a 99% chance that One Direction isn't going to do anything different, that all they'll ever be is a pop group singing songs for little girls, until of course their fan base gets bored of them and moves on to the next thing, and they'll just be forgotten in a few years. But whenever you hate a boy band simply because they sing stupid poppy songs for little girls, just remember, one of the most beloved and influential rock and roll bands of all time did it too.
And so did many other British invasion bands who wanted to capitalize on the Beatles' success and formula. And even then they garnered popularity with their musicianship. Why do you think films like Stripes paid tribute to Manfred Mann? Maybe because, I don't know, they actually sound good? And that's the way it is. I don't hate ADoseOfBuckley, and I liked some of his other musical autopsy reviews. I just think that the way he compared the Beatles to One Direction demonstrated how asymmetrical the comparison was. The Beatles managed to score 20 hits in the United States, not including 6 or 7 hits that they made in the UK. If One Direction can do that, maybe I'll reconsider. But if you're going to base this all on lyrics, the Beatles were not the only band to do such a thing. And the British invasion should not be undermined, as it was a salient movement in musical history, and it spawned the generation of many influential acts and bands that still retain a presence on the radio and in musical discussion today. You can say all you want about the lyrics, but at least the Beatles and many other acts did manage to write music well. And besides, if you want to consider covers, Jerry and the Pacemakers, Dusty Springfield, and The Animals all did fantastic covers of songs and made it possible through their own musical talent or musicianship. One Direction has yet to show any musicianship from all members, or any songwriting from just the 5 alone, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. Anyway, that's all I have to say about this. This is Youngblood Fantasy 91, and ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you all in the brighter later.